morning and welcome to the October 1st, 2024 regular meeting of the Baldwin County Commission. The first item on our agenda is we have Pastor Don Hutchinson here from the First Methodist Church in Bay Minette. I believe you're the new pastor there. If you would come up, he's agreed to do our invocation. And then following the invocation, Commissioner McKenzie will lead us in the pledge. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Let's pray. Lord, we do thank you for this day and the gracious gift of it. But Lord, we do want to pause just to lift up those who have been experienced loss from this latest hurricane, whether it be personal property, friends, family. Be with them in their time of pain and grief. And Lord, we pray for this body, that you will give them wisdom and discernment beyond their own understanding, so that their words and their actions might be guided by your love and grace and benefit all. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the adoption of minutes, but there is a correction. There's a correction that's been called in from the September 17th, 2024 to correct the record for resolution number 2024-169, which was item CD5. It incorrectly listed the federal interest amount as $105,925.60, which instead it should be listed as $132,407 even, which was $66,114 and $66,293 respectively. So we need a motion to include that correction.
I'm sure I'll make a motion we approve the September the 17th, 2024 regular meeting, including the correction.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the September 17th, 2024 meeting minutes with the correction as stated earlier. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Next item is the finance chair.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we approve our bills.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to pay our bills. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is item BA2, which is a notification of interim payments approved by Clerk Treasurer as allowed under Policy 8.1. Then we have our consent agenda, as was discussed in our work session. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Ayes have it. The consent agenda is approved. And just a note, there were no changes to the consent agenda. Next, we have no presentations, but we do have a public hearing. So I have quite a few people that are signed up for the public hearing. Is there anyone that hasn't signed up for the public hearing? I advise you to go ahead and do that now if you wish to speak. And just a note that individuals wishing to speak during the public hearing must fill out a speaker form. Comments from individuals should be limited to 3 minutes. If you're representing a group, please state that when you get up here. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, please limit your comments to 5. First person on the speaker list that I have is Mr. Tucker Dorsey.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
Appreciate your work here today. I'm going to try to keep under 3 minutes. I don't represent the group as a whole, but if I get a little bit, I'll be obviously mindful of the time. Moved here in 3 weeks from now, I'll have moved here 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I started a home building company here, working in the county, and at the time, the Chambers of Commerce and everybody's wanting us to figure out ways that we can create jobs and growth so that our kids could stay here and live here where we raised them. We've done a good job in that, and I proudly get to say we. You guys have done a great job with the mega site and with other projects going on to bring people to our county, to help our county grow, to create more economic opportunity for our residents here. These new subdivision regulations do nothing but increase the cost of housing. I've read them, and I cannot see what the objective of the commission is with these. I see that they're trying to create more green space. The mandate of more green space increases the cost of lots, or it decreases the cost of land because you're trying to find market equilibrium.
You know what? I forgot.
Yeah, we forgot a lot of stuff, so.
You're going to get more time.
Well, I won't start over.
I didn't close the meeting, and I didn't open the public hearing, and I didn't even, I guess you just, you
Go ahead.
got me shook up. Imagine
Madam
that.
Chairman, may we have that stricken from the record?
I think we all needed a laugh. Oh, that wasn't intended. You know what? I will let you finish if you want to finish, but I do need to close the meeting and open the public hearing.
You're the chair, however you wish to
Okay.
manage your meeting.
I am going to close the regular meeting and open the public hearing, and I will let you speak, but then I do need to get my planning director up here to give his presentation. So I will give you the option to finish
Would you like the
speaking.
director to speak first?
I would,
Okay.
and then I'll call you back up, okay? All right.
This helps me next month.
I have never done that. I have never, ever done that in all the meetings I've ever directed before, even being on the commission. Okay, so, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman and Commission. Appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to go through our proposed amendments to the subdivision regulations. Before we get into the actual text of what we're proposing, I wanted to take a moment to talk about how the Planning and Zoning Department and the regulations that we enforce meet the strategic priorities of the strategic plan of Baldwin County. The two primary areas we work in are the growth and infrastructure balance and the protecting of the natural resources. Both of these items are strategic priorities of the strategic plan, and when we work through those, they both feed in to the economic prosperity and workforce third section, even though we don't have as much direct input into that. The things we do does influence the economic prosperity portion of the county's priorities. So to do this, we've developed the planning department has developed a mission statement that helps guide how we fulfill the obligations and meet the strategic goals of the county. Our mission statement is: the mission of the Baldwin County Planning and Zoning Department is to provide excellent customer service through proactive outreach, cooperative policies, and efficient processes to support the Baldwin County Strategic Plan by facilitating sustainable, safe-built communities while conserving natural resources to maintain the county's unique quality of life. So that mission statement is kind of what we strive to do on a daily basis. To do that, we have 4 guiding principles that we've established to fulfill the strategic plan of the county and the mission of the Planning and Zoning Department. The first is the customer service. We recognize that our customers include the citizens, the development community, outside agencies, and elected officials. Number 2 is quality. We employ a planning process that is fair, customer-friendly, and timely to develop high-quality planning solutions that focus on best development outcomes for all stakeholders. Number 3 is consistency. We want to consistently interpret and input adopted plans, policies, and ordinances and regulations. And last is community development and sustainability. We want to anticipate current and future county needs by developing long-range planning documents designed to protect and enhance the county's unique quality of life and natural resources for current and future generations. These 4 things are really guide how we've worked on the subdivision regulation amendment, and also kind of set the culture of the Planning and Zoning Department. So before we get into the text of the details of the text amendment, I wanted to talk a little bit about the legal basis of why we're here today. One is just the differentiation of what the roles of the Planning Commission are versus what the roles of the County Commission are when it comes to planning and zoning ordinances and regulations. The creation of the Planning Commission, one thing, they are created, they are appointed by this board, and they are given the duties as stated in state law and as governed by the Baldwin County Commission. They have to hold one meeting a month and shall keep record of resolutions and actions which are public record. The county commission, this board has the ability in state law to designate the planning commission to administer the subdivision regulations. So they don't create the regulations, but they do, through your guidance, you've given them the ability to administer the regulations that you adopt at this board. Some more duties about the Planning Commission and what the process is for adopting and amending ordinances and regulations. The primary role of the Planning Commission is to develop and maintain an up-to-date master plan for the physical development of unincorporated Baldwin County. That is their primary role by state law. They draft that master plan, they hold a public hearing, and they make a recommendation to this board, which becomes, if this board agrees, you guys agree and vote it into practice. The Baldwin County Commission, like I said, is they're the policy-making board that adopts the ordinance and regulations as necessary, and the ordinances should be made in accordance with the master plan that was developed. So that's how the master plan ties into the ordinances and regulations that are adopted. So when it's time to amend a regulation like we're here to discuss today, there's a couple of things that state law and our subdivision regulations require us to do. One is state law says we have to publish it for 3 consecutive weeks in the legal section of the newspaper, and also have it available for inspection at all the courthouses, which we have done. We've also had it on our website for people to download and review. The regulations do not come into effect until the county commission holds a public hearing and takes action on it. So we're here today for the public hearing to gain any final input and comments on the draft as written. So discussing a little bit about the timeline of how we got to today, this process has actually been going on for well over a year. It began July 18th of 2023 when the commission voted to adopt our vision master plan. It moved on in December. There were 3 different public input sessions held, one in Bay Minette, one in Foley, and one in Robertsdale. On December 27th, the Planning Commission had a subcommittee that provided a several-page list of items through email about items that needed to be considered to be addressed in the regulations. So we took all that and put together what with all that information gathered, what should be the goals of the subdivision regulation amendment. And we presented those goals to the County Commission here at the July 18th, 2024 Road and Bridge meeting to kind of understand what our framework would be as we move forward through the subdivision amendment process. During this time period also, when we started drafting the regulations, we had multiple one-on-one meetings with people from the development community, many of which are here today, to understand what they wish to see and answer questions on their end. So it took us from mid-July till the beginning of September to incorporate all that input that we were receiving from all the different entities involved. So that's how we get to where we are today. September 4th, the public advertising began as required by state law. We presented the draft regulations to the Planning Commission during the work session on September 5th. And today we're here to hold the public hearing at the County Commission on October the 1st. So as I mentioned earlier, the goals that we were trying to achieve with the subdivision amendments were, what we want to do is strengthen the regulations but streamline the process. So what that really is looking at is make the administrative process much more streamlined and efficient to go through, but have our regulations modernized where we're meeting current needs of current and future needs of the community. The second part was addressing our stormwater management requirements, which is, again, kind of modernizing the way we require stormwater systems to be designed. introducing low-impact development techniques as an option that we did not previously have in our regulations. The third piece is open space and landscaping requirements. Again, focusing on the livability of neighborhoods as they're developed and the outcomes of those developments as they happen. To make sure that we have livable neighborhoods that are sustainable for the second, third, and fourth homeowners they're buying in. They're continuing to want to reinvest in those neighborhoods and keep it a viable neighborhood for the future. The fourth thing was just some updates to the traffic management circulation requirements, which we'll talk about with how we safely access our neighborhoods. And then the last thing is a lot of general text cleanup that is always necessary just to clarify some unclear things in the regulations and also provide some additional descriptions so everybody understands what the regulations are requiring. So as we talk about the process, right now our current process for a typical subdivision plat takes over 15 steps sometimes. And it takes quite a while to get through the permitting process. It starts with a sketch plan, a plat, application and approval, and then that gets into a preliminary plat application, which eventually gets to the Planning Commission and they decide what they want to do with it. If they approve it, then there's actually two different construction permits they have to secure right now. First is the subdivision permit and second is the commercial turnout permit. A lot of these things require the same information and creates a lot of redundant processes and a lot of redundant intake stuff. So then once they finally get through all that, they can get their two permits issued, construct the subdivision, and get the final plat. So the applicants end up spending a good portion of their 2-year approval period going through a construction plan permitting process, which is inefficient and inefficient for the applicant as well as inefficient for the staff. So what we're doing here is, with the restructuring of the county, the different departments, the highway department, the building department, and the planning department are working much more closely together to streamline our processes. So right now, what we're proposing with these updates are that every application would come in with a pre-application meeting just to let staff understand what they're trying to accomplish, give them some feedback about things they need to make sure they address in their application and get them on the right path towards the Planning Commission. Then they submit their preliminary plat application and it gets to Planning Commission, and so we've reduced that front end significantly. And then once it gets through Planning Commission, instead of going through that multi-step process, we'll have one construction plan review. So all infrastructure improvements that are necessary to support the development will be approved at one time. And our goal with that would be to have that subdivision permit issued within 45 days of preliminary plat approval by Planning Commission. Now there's a lot of variables in that. It depends on how quickly the design engineer can turn around the construction plans and respond to comments, but from a staff perspective and a process perspective, we want to have that turned around within 45 days. Then of course they construct their subdivision and go through the final plat process, which is pretty straightforward already. Then on the back end, Eddie and I have been working, and Mark as well, about how we process our residential building permits after plats are completed. So a little bit about our current process. The applicant has to come into the Planning and Zoning Department and get their site plan approval. And then once they go through that process with Planning and Zoning, then they take an application to the Highway Department to get their driveway permit. And then once that gets approved, then the applicant takes all that to the building department and starts the building plan permit. So it's a very cumbersome and redundant process to pull building permits right now. So what we're doing is through CitizenServe, we're streamlining that process so the applicant can come in to the building department and Eddie's group can take in all the information needed for the planning and zoning approval and the highway department approval. And then the three departments can work together to issue their comments and approve the plans that are necessary, and the building department can push out that single permit in the time frame that it would normally just take to get a building permit. So it's going to really streamline and expedite that process on the back end. So getting into the actual text amendments that we're talking about of the subdivision regulations, we're going to start at the beginning with the exceptions to required approvals. This is the family division section. As everyone knows, the state laws require us to allow a family exemption to settle court orders and estates and things like that is the intent of that law. So what we're adding in here is some clarification that if the family exemption is requested and approved, that it would just have a deed restriction for anyone who is not an immediate family member, it can't leave an immediate family member within 24 months of the approval of the exemption. This is really clarifying what the state law says. So the state law says that in the event that there is any sale, deed, or transfer of land by the owner or an immediate family member to someone other than immediate family, then this chapter shall apply. So really, the state law is open where it doesn't really provide any time limit, that it could be years. When it leaves an immediate family member, they would have to go through a subdivision process. So we're just clarifying that what is appropriate is a 24-month time period after the exemption is approved. The last thing we did with the family exemption is clarify what is an immediate family member to align with the state law, and we're adding back in grandparent, grandchild, and step-related individuals as defined immediate family members. The next portion of the exceptions we'll talk about is the large 35-acre plus subdivisions. So our regulations currently allow the division of one parcel into two resultant parcels if each are greater than 35 acres in size. What we're clarifying here is that the easement to access those parcels must be a minimum of 60 feet wide. And you'll see this through several things in our presentation. The reason the 60-foot easement is required is that oftentimes these easements eventually over time become or wish to become county right-of-ways. And if we don't have 60 feet available to us, it becomes very cumbersome for the highway department to try to assemble enough property to actually create a right-of-way out of that easement. The preliminary plat application requirements. This is discussing the utility, the written reports for the ability to serve with utilities. What we're requiring here is already in practice today, but there's been a lot of questions about what our regulations actually require to be submitted to provide with the written report for the ability to serve. So we're clarifying that by saying, okay, well, if it's sewer, you have to provide the location, type, and size of the sanitary sewer main adjacent to the proposed development. Clarify that the receiving water treatment facility with a permit number, permitted capacity, and daily previous 12 months of discharge flows as reported to ADEM. And if sewer is not available adjacent to the site, give a plan of how the system is going to be improved and expanded to accommodate the development. On the water side, we're requiring very similar information: the location, type, and size of the water main adjacent to the proposed development, the hydrant flow test at the nearest hydrant that includes flow, static pressure, residual pressure, and calculated fire flow at 20 psi. For subdivisions that are more than 25 lots, the engineer should provide design calculations that show the projected pressure at the most interior hydrant planned in the system. And what this is about is making sure that once the development comes online, there's adequate flows and pressures inside the development. And as I mentioned before, if water is not currently adjacent to the site, provide plans that show how the site will be served and the system will be expanded to serve the site. Special requirements for large acre subdivisions. We have a section in our regulations that allow 20-plus acre lots that have that will have minimal improvements required for 20-plus acre lots. You see here that in this section, we were already requiring the 60-foot wide easement. So we're making the other sections consistent with this one because that's good practice. The biggest things in here is making sure that if the existing and proposed easement, it either must be through uplands or it must have a USAC permit to be approved. And what we're doing with this is making sure that if an easement is platted, it can actually be used to access the properties. It's not an easement that can't be used because of some wetland issue. The second thing is no more than 5 lots can access by the same ingress and egress easement. The reasoning behind this is that, when you have large acre subdivisions like this, there's dirt roads and things that are accessing, kind of single-purpose dirt roads that are accessing these lots. So any more than 5 lots, regardless of how big they are, can overload a little dirt road pretty quickly. And if there are 2 or more lots will be accessed by the same ingress-egress easement, they will have to get a commercial turnout permit, and that's about ensuring the safety of how they connect to the existing county road. Moving on to section 5, which is the minimum design standards. Some clarifications in here. One, for the large lots that do not have water or sewer availability, we're clarifying that it has to have 40,000 square feet of contiguous uplands. This is to make sure that they can comply with the health department regulations. So if they're going to have a well and septic system on the lot, they have to have 40,000 square feet of uplands, because you can't put a well or a septic system in a wetland area. So this is making sure that they don't create lots that can't get health department permits. The next piece is we do not increase the minimum lot square footage in our regulations, so we can still do a 7,500 square foot lot. However, if the development is proposing to do traditional stormwater and not have gravity sewer systems, which we'll talk about more in a minute, the minimum lot width goes up to 80 feet. And a lot of this is to provide incentive and encouragement for developments to use LID and gravity sewer systems. So if they choose to do gravity sewer systems and LID stormwater techniques, they can reduce their lot width to 60 feet. And of course, the minimum lot size is still 7,500 square feet. That remains unchanged. So it's really setting up a way of incentivizing the LID and the gravity sewer systems. For the sanitary sewer systems, as I was just mentioning, developments of more than 50 lots should be gravity systems. And we're discouraging the use of low pressure systems on large developments, because we'll get into that in a minute about the pros and cons of that. But we are allowing, it's not completely prohibited, that where gravity sewer is not practical because of topography or whatever the issue may be, if it's not a practical solution, then the design engineer can submit a statement justifying the need for low pressure, and the waiver can be approved by the Planning Commission. So they still have the ability to request low pressure systems in development, but there has to be an engineering reason why they couldn't achieve a gravity system. So looking at some of our comparisons of the pros and cons, and weighing the pros of low pressure versus gravity, obviously the low pressure systems, it has a lower initial cost for the developer, and it is not, as I just mentioned, it's not dependent on terrain. So topography doesn't really affect how a low pressure system works. Gravity system, there's a tipping point with a development that you have $4,000 or $5,000 per house of sunk costs in a grinder pump. So there's a tipping point where, depending on how many houses you have, that it starts becoming actually cheaper on the end homeowner to have, on the initial cost, to have a gravity system, because that there's a point where the $4,000 or $5,000 a lot has paid for the lift station and the gravity system. Obviously, the long-term maintenance cost for the end user is much less. They're not having to maintain a pump and power bill and all the things that go along with having a grinder pump. The gravity systems have lower opportunities for sanitary sewer overflows, because it is a more controlled system, and it's managed by the utility company, who has trained professionals to do so. And gravity systems aren't susceptible to power outages at residence. So when in a storm event, if the power goes out, obviously if the home has no power, their septic sewer system is not working. Where you have gravity, you have the utility companies that are maintaining those lift stations, and they can provide backup power and keep the whole neighborhood running at one single point. Moving on to broadband. We already have the requirement in the regulations to provide broadband connectivity. This is a strategic goal of the county. However, the previous language was kind of confusing and really couldn't be implemented the way it was intended. So we're clarifying that, obviously, if broadband is there, run it through the neighborhood. If it's not there, put the conduit in to make it easier for the fiber company to come in and put in later. We're getting a lot of complaints at the highway department and the planning and zoning department about the disruption in neighborhoods from the fiber companies coming in and tearing up everyone's yard and everything, putting that to fact. So what we want to do is just think ahead. If it's not available, let's put the conduit in so at least they can easily run it through the neighborhood when it becomes available. On lots, I've already mentioned about the 40,000 square foot contiguous uplands and why that's important. The main thing here is to minimize requests for highway construction setback appeals. We're saying that the lots are 20,000 square feet or smaller, that no more than 25% of the side yard or 10% of the front or rear yard can be within the highway construction setback. And if you think about the intent of what the highway construction setback is to protect those major county roads that may have the requirement for future expansion from being impeded by, development activities and homes and structures being built. So again, what this provides is that if a road does expand in the future, that there is still a protected backyard for the lots that back up to those major highways. Minimum development standards on the frontage on improved roads. We're including for developments of 50 lots or more that are adjacent to an unpaved road. The unpaved road must be paved the length of the proposed lots. We're getting a lot of complaints to the highway department and zone department about some neighborhoods that have been built adjacent to dirt roads that weren't paved, and dust issues and a lot of health problems, health issues, concerns that are coming out of those unpaved roads. And the county ends up having to go out and pave those dirt roads after the development has occurred. So we're requiring that on the developments. The subdivisions with 50 or more lots also should have 2 or more accesses. This is to, 1, improve the access for emergency services, and it also helps distribute traffic in and out of the development to not be in a single point. So it's a safety issue, and it also helps traffic circulation. If the development has access to 2 different roads, those 2 accesses should be on the separate roads and not on the single road. But if they are on one road, they'll have to have proper separation as approved by the highway department and the planning department. Street standards, we've added the typical residential street section at the top. Is what we've always had in our standards. We are adding the street trees, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the main thing we're adding here is there's been a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission level about when there's dense development, that if the small streets are adequate to allow the service to those more dense developments and allow room for guests to park on the street if they so choose to do that, and still have access to emergency vehicles. So what we're adding there is the option to say, if in a dense development, if there's a need to have this wider section that would allow some more room, that we could evaluate that on an as-needed basis. But it's really more about putting that tool in the toolbox to be able to utilize that if it's necessary in some more dense developments. Going on to the stormwater requirements. You all saw this at the Road and Bridge meeting, but if you look at the water cycle, if you look at the pre-development water cycle, you have a lot of infiltration, a lot of uptake through vegetation and evaporation, and that's kind of your natural hydrology of an undeveloped site. So currently how our current regulations are, and the traditional way of doing stormwater, is that everything's captured and sent through pipes to a detention pond, and then it discharges at a single point or a couple direct points. And so what we're proposing to do with the new regulations is to try to mimic that natural water cycle as much as possible using LID techniques when available, which would allow, even post-development, allow more infiltration to happen, have more plants with uptake and evaporation, and kind of minimize those point discharges off-site. So the graphic I always like to use to walk through this concept is, this is a typical 40-acre parcel in Baldwin County. You have, it's kind of a high point in the middle of the property. Water's shedding, either infiltrating or shedding on the surface to the west and around to the south, and it's either sheet flowing across the adjacent property to that drainage swell, or it's going out to the roadside swell and draining out to that same natural drainage way. So that's kind of your natural hydraulic flow patterns. What happens when post-development under the current regulations is now we're capturing all of that water in the streets and the pipes and directing it, in this case, to two centralized stormwater ponds and discharging at 2 points. Now, it meets our regulations. This pre-development discharge rate and this post-development discharge rate are equal. So it is not violating any regulations, but that rate is all being concentrated, in this case, to two specific points, which causes downstream drainage issues with culverts being overrun or channel issues with the roadside swell or the natural drainage swell to the west there. So what we want to do is try to encourage that the stormwater systems be designed to have bio-retention ponds, rain gardens, and bio-swells so that it allows, one, it allows as much infiltration and uptake and evaporation as possible. But two, when it's designed properly, it would mimic the same drainage patterns as pre-development. So you're not channelizing it to one specific outfall area, and you can kind of mimic that existing outfall conditions. So getting into the tech, the developers of that, but what we're really encouraging here is the design engineer to work closely with the planning and zoning department and highway department to find what that best fit LID process is for that site, because each site is different. Each site has different hydrology, different soils, and so there's not a one-size-fits all with LID techniques. So we're really encouraging the design engineer to have a creativity to find that solution and utilize that. On the stormwater management construction plan requirements, we're requiring a master-like grading plan, which sets the finished floor elevation for the homes and shows what the design engineer's intent was when the neighborhood builds out, how that stormwater should be flowing once all the homes are constructed. And what we're preventing here is in a lot of cases, different home builders come in and build things at different elevations, some higher than they should or some lower, and it creates either impounding water or and flowing water onto properties that was not intended for it to flow on the stormwater master plan. So this really gives the building department and the planning department a tool and a resource to look at when building permits come in to understand what that intent of the design engineer was to how those lots should flow once the homes are constructed. Moving into the open space requirements. This is a graphic I always show that shows kind of the comparison of open space versus density. Your traditional open space, your traditional neighborhood development would have, even what's shown on this graphic, has large lots, but there's no preserved open space at all. So the entire parcel is filled up with road and lots and nothing is preserved. The open space requirements shown in the middle, which is 10% of the site is reserved for open space. You have more density in smaller lots, but there's actually less overall impact on that site, on that development site, because there's preserved open space available for the residents. And then finally, the conservation development, which is kind of what we classify as our PUDs and our PRDs that allow even smaller lots, but require more open space. So it's just a good comparison to show that density is not always the determining factor when you're evaluating developments. It's really about how the development is occurring, how open space is being applied, and what it really does for the impact to that neighborhood and the livability of that neighborhood. So how we get there in our text, Article 6, that all new developments of 25 lots or more shall have the open space requirements. Now, if it's lots that have if it's a development that has a minimum lot size of 30,000 square feet or more, they don't have to go by the open space requirements, because, as y'all heard me say before, it's about the balance between private open space and public open space. So if you have larger lots, obviously you don't really need neighborhood space because they have their own yards for their open space. But as you go into the more dense developments, the trade-off there is to have more neighborhood space, places that kids can go play ball, walk the dog, and have some amenity for the neighborhood to use. Now, that doesn't mean that the developers have to construct clubhouses and pools and these other things. That would be at their discretion. What we're talking about here is just preserving open space and usable open space for the residents to use once the development occurs. So as I mentioned, all subdivisions will be required to have 10% open space reserved. Half of that must be usable, and then we define what is usable open space. So wetlands and buffer areas and things like that can be part of your open space calculations, but they're not usable open space. So usable open space would be for large developments, actual parks that could be 5 or more acres. But most of what we'll see will be neighborhood greens and squares, which are half an acre to 5 acres, and then small pocket parks in the form of plazas or playground areas. All of those would be classified as usable open space. And the design requirements, so what we're going for here is that the open space can't be tucked in behind things and forgotten about where it gets overgrown and not used. What we want is to the greatest extent possible that it should be centrally located and be an integral part of the neighborhood. So the neighborhood should be designed around these open spaces. The second part is that it should be accessible to as many lots as possible. So we want these neighborhoods to be walkable so that the residents can walk down to the park, with their kids or with their pets, whatever they want to do, and enjoy those open spaces. As I mentioned before, 50% of it must be used for passive or active recreation, such as parks, recreation facilities, or pedestrian ways. Land that is utilized for stormwater ponds and facilities do not count towards open space because that is a piece of the infrastructure. However, as a incentive for LID techniques, if the LID techniques are being implemented, the LID facilities, we will allow them to be counted towards usable open space. And again, that's really more about, one, they are a feature. They have plants, they're a nice thing to look at, but it's also trying to give an incentive for the developer to use LID techniques in lieu of having additional open space. The landscape requirements, I sort of mentioned this earlier about on the road buffers, that when lots back up to an existing county road, we would require a 10-foot wide landscape buffer. The purpose of this is to provide some screening and some protection of the residents' backyards from the existing county roads. Street trees will be required to be planted. They would be designed in coordination with the utility corridors within the new street right-of-ways. Street trees are required every 100 feet. And then finally, the lakes and detention areas shall be planted with trees and shrubs, as specified here, again, to provide some screening and provide some beautification to those stormwater facilities. Obviously, if it's an LID facility, it's going to have its own plants and different things, so that would really just apply to traditional stormwater ponds. The landscape plans and tree preservation, just want to be clear that we're not requiring tree preservation, we're not forcing trees to be preserved. However, to encourage developers to encourage existing vegetation as much as they can, if they do choose to not clear cut the site and preserve some existing trees, they can count that towards the landscaping requirements, which could reduce their required planting. So I just want to be clear, this is not a requirement for tree preservation. This is really more of an incentive to, hey, if you have some existing trees and if you want to reduce your landscaping plantings that are required, you can actually preserve some of your existing trees in the buffer areas or wherever, and it can count towards your landscaping plan and your requirements. The last thing, before I finish up, just for any questions, is we updated the planning and development section. Some of our minimum acreages were kind of not in alignment with current market trends and conditions. So we reduced the large-scale planned unit development minimum acres to 250 acres, and the small-scale planned unit development, which is the more typical one we see, we reduced it from 5 acres down to 3 acres. And again, encouraging people to utilize that tool more often. with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions, and anyone in the public can email us questions at planning@baldwincountyal.gov.
Okay, commissioners, I think
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Can you go back to the slide where it says the family subdivision process? And just my opinion, I don't like the 24-month. And that's just my opinion on that. With my family being a farm back in the 70s and 80s, I think it's ridiculous to put that in there for a family. That's just my opinion. And I know I keep saying that because I don't speak on the commission. I'm just speaking for Matt McKenzie. And I'll give you another example. My sister has 40 acres. She lives on it, her and her husband. There's an easement that goes to her property. It's 20 foot wide. It joins my property, that 20 foot wide. And I'll get back to the family in just a minute. But to the south of me is my neighbor. His house is so close to that 20 foot easement that there will never, if my sister decides when she needs to sell it because of medical reasons or whatever, and I'm asking you because I want to see if you can answer this. If she had to sell it for medical reasons, because she's 15 years older than I am, or she wanted to divide it up to her one child and then her stepchildren that she has. If it's 5 or more, they can't make that easement wider because I'm not going to give them any more property of my property, and I know my neighbor's not. So it's only a 20 foot easement, and this was done in the 80s and 90s when my father gave that property to my sister. So what I'm getting at, if she wanted to divide it up into 5 or more lots, she's not going to be able to because the county's going to require them to have a 40 or I can't remember, 60? A 60 foot easement to go back to her property? Is that correct?
And so what you're describing.
And I'm not on the family part. I'm on this part because I'm thinking about it and I'll forget. So I wanted to ask.
So what you're describing there is exactly why we're talking about the 60 foot easement on new things, because that situation happens and then that landowner, in this case your sister, has a property that she can't divide anymore because there's not enough access easement to get there. And it's really not fair to that owner to have something that was done way before then to not be able to do the things, but because we just didn't get enough easement to begin with. So,
but if she had 7 children, and I'm just saying, if she divided it, they're not going to be able to unless they got a little section.
Her children.
They're going to divide up 40 acres by 7.
it's a family subdivision.
There's two different things. So for a family division, she's trying to. Her estate is to give it to her children, right? That is what the state law is designed to do. She can do that. The easement doesn't matter for that. That's a family division. She's giving it to her kids.
And she was only going to have a 20 foot easement.
Right. But what happens is that, a lot of times is deeded to, a family member to sometimes the same day, sell it, deed it to someone else. And that's just a circumvention of the law and the regulations as they were intended. So there would be nothing that would stop in your case, your sister from willing it to her kids. And then after 2 years, they can sell it. They can do whatever they want to do with it. But
what's the purpose of the 2 years? More
it's
than
really
just not for selling. What's the purpose?
So there's a couple ways the different counties approach this. Other counties in the state say you can only do a family division to settle an estate or a court order. Like that is the only exemption that's available, right? So, that's it. So if the court's not saying this or an estate settlement's not happening, you can't qualify for the family division. We didn't want to go that far with it. So we said, again, to try to align with what the purpose of the state law is to say, we want to be able to divide property within a family, to settle estate, to settle court orders. Within 2 years, that's fine. Because if it's being turned over within 2 years, that's not what's really happening with the property, right? So that's where the 2 years comes from. And so that is the approach. Again, like I said, there are other counties that take a little more of a heavy-handed approach with it, and that's something we can discuss at a different time. But we did not go that far with that.
Where did the 24 months come from? Did it come from another county that's doing the same thing?
Well, so there's a couple of places. There's been some attorney opinions that has proposed 5 years. And the municipality, but I know this doesn't apply to us because we're a county, not a municipality, they have different laws, but the municipality code of Alabama actually specifically says 24 months. Now, I know that really has no bearing on what we do, but there is some cases out there where 24 months seems to be a reasonable time period to adhere to what the state law is intended.
And I understand what you're saying, but I feel like, my opinion, is that we're punishing people that have large pieces of property with families, farmers, or anybody like that. I just feel that way, and that's just my gut is telling me this. I feel like we're putting too much stipulation on somebody when it comes to their property. That's just my opinion.
So let me clarify one thing too, that is that the exemption process, it doesn't exempt the property from the subdivision regulations. It exempts them from the administrative process and the legislative process of going through a plat approval.
And I understand what you're saying. I think you could look at case-by-case situation. I have 10 acres, and if I wanted to give my daughter an acre of it on the south or the northeast corner, and we have a 60-foot right-of-way in the very front that joins my property and my neighbor's, but if we didn't have a 60-foot, or what if I had a 20-foot that my dad did years ago for an ingress, egress for my family to go back in the day? If I deeded that to my daughter, 2 acres that I wanted her to build a house, she wouldn't be able to. And what I'm getting at is say that she had to sell it for emergency reasons, then you go back under the subdivision rules, correct?
Well, the thing is, if you're going to do a family subdivision, which is 2 acres,
Right.
that's not the 5-acre issue that we're talking about to begin with. 2 acres would be strictly to your daughter. There's no requirement for you to build a road or any of that kind of stuff, but it's just the 24-month requirement if she wanted to sell it to somebody else. Now, the 24 months is something that I think, could be discussed. Is there a time, there are some times when these happen where the ink doesn't even dry on the deeds before it's flipped. So is there a time frame that you think would be reasonable, would be my question.
I don't know yet. I really don't. Planning and zoning, since I've been on the commission, is a nightmare for me. I'm not really educated on this, and it takes 2 terms for somebody to really get it, or been on the Planning and Zoning Commission all the time. So I just feel like we put too much restriction on somebody when it comes to family land. That's
One more
just me.
clarification on that. So if it's deeded to an immediate family member and they wait 2 years, they can sell it to whoever without any additional easements or anything. That's a lot of record. There's no restrictions at that point. They can move on.
Okay.
So it's not that we would come back afterwards, because matter of fact, the state law is written so loosely right now that it says in the event when it leaves, it's then subject. So if theoretically you could come back and require them on the back end the way the state law is written, but we don't think that's the right thing to do either. So once it becomes a lot of record after that 2-year, a lot of record and it goes beyond that 2-year deed restriction, then they can be sold just like any other lot of record and without any additional easement requirements or anything like that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Is there any
You know
other,
how I feel about it.
any other questions for Jay before we start the people who've signed up to speak?
Can I have one more question, if you don't mind, Commissioner? What is LID? Real quick.
Low impact development.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Impact development.
Usable green space. Thought we talked about this, and we just want to make sure that I was on the right page when you told me about this. If somebody has one of those green-looking grassy beds that's being called a stormwater retention type area, if, let's say you put a walking track around it, or it actually has water in it and become a fishing pond, or whatever the circumstances is, would that count for somebody's usable green space?
Yes, and I failed to mention that earlier, and I apologize, but so even if you have a traditional stormwater pond and you make it a wet pond and put a walking trail around it, and so people can, it becomes.
Put some benches around it.
Amenitize it, then it can be counted as usable open space. But what it is saying is that if it's a typical just dry detention pond, there's no feature to it.
I got you.
Right, that can't be.
I just want to make sure that, because that was a big deal to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, let me get to that. I can tell you exactly how it says it, but yes, that would be allowed to be counted towards your usable open space. If you amenitize a pond or make it a wet pond and put the walking trail around, make it a feature and an amenity for the neighborhood, then yes, it would be a usable open space.
Okay, Any other questions for Jay? I do have a question. Mr. Gruber, do you have any questions for Jay? Question I would like for you to address, met with several people over the last few weeks, and in particular, it's come up about that this is going to increase costs significantly for developing the lots. And could you address what you kind of shared in some of those meetings with the people who brought that up? About different, like, first of all, this is kind of like clearing up some language. Just, you can say it better than I can.
Right, well, there's two different discussions we've had about development costs. One is what I kind of briefly mentioned during the presentation about the gravity sewer versus low pressure. And so, again, so a lift station is $250,000. The gravity pipes and inlets are more expensive than the small low pressure force mains. But, when you have a development, that's kind of more of a set cost. So once you have that lift station in, you can serve 50 lots with that, or you can serve 200 lots with that sometimes, depending on how big the lift station is and the topography. So there's a point where that $4,000 or $5,000 per lot with grinder pumps and low pressure systems actually become a greater cost, even initial cost, to the initial homeowner once they cross that threshold of what has paid for the gravity system, and then what that kind of sunk $4,000 or $5,000 per lot is for low pressure systems. So that was the one piece. So there's.
I think you kind of said it was either going to go in when the infrastructure was put in initially, or the vertical construction. It was one of the two.
Right. So what I mean by that.
That was kind of what I remember.
So what you have is basically picking
so the cost of the house is still in there.
Right. So what you have two different phases of development. You have the land development phase and the home development phase of land development. So the land development, obviously, if you do the gravity system, it's going to reduce that land development cost, but you're just transferring that low pressure cost, sewer cost, to the home builder, which ends up being on the homeowner. So that cost doesn't go away. It's still in the development cycle. It's just a different portion of the development cycle. And like I just mentioned, there's a point where that cost outweighs what the gravity system costs. So the thought that it reduces development costs is not 100% accurate, because the cost is still there. It's just in a different phase of the development, and the homeowner at the end still absorbs that cost. And then with low pressure systems, they also absorb the long-term maintenance cost because they're responsible for maintaining the grinder pumps, maintaining the power bills, and doing all those things that have to go along with maintaining that system. Whereas the gravity system, the utility company is maintaining the lift station, and they are the trained professionals to manage those lift stations. So it's good engineering and design practice and good development practice to do that. I mean, so like I said, it's not really about one's cost, it's about when we're choosing to pay that development cost. Either way, the end homeowner is absorbing it. So
that's just one aspect of what could increase development costs. What were the other concerns?
The other aspects were the LID, the amount of room it takes for low impact development design, and the landscaping cost. So again, going back to the LID, understanding that is a concern from the development community. That's why we built in the incentives of, hey, you can count it towards your usable open space, you can count towards these things, because we understand it's going to take a little bit more room, it's going to take a little bit more creativity of how you design that. So we don't want to have that requirement on, then on top of that require the 10% open space as well. So we're saying if you do that, you can bring that all down and theoretically could have less room being taken up on your development side if you design your system the right way.
And if you choose to do a PRD, you can reduce your lot sizes
even more.
Still even have more lot sizes than maybe you could if you didn't.
That's correct.
So on a typical 40-acre tract, like you were explaining, our required open spaces is going to do away with how many lots the developer was going to plan to sell.
So the example I used at Road and Bridge, if you remember, I'm sorry, I don't have it in this presentation.
I mean, is it going to be the, like, 8 of them or something like that?
It was 8 lots from what I presented, and that was without redesigning anything. That was literally just taking out lots and putting in 10% of open space.
Do you have that slide that shows the 3
Yes.
odd, weird shape, which I wish it was more square, but there. Just, I think it would be good to kind of point that out again, that the traditional versus the...
Right. So why this, well, I've always used this slide.
I'll interrupt you a second. We get a lot of, it's really very hard to balance this with the public. You know, you got one side wants to, you got the land cost, and you got to get enough lots in there in order to pay for the land cost. And then you got another community that wants to see large lots because they don't want to change the landscape out in the rural countryside.
Right.
And so I think this is a great example to show how you can accomplish, it's a weird shape, I don't know where you come up with that, but anyhow. But if you can follow the lot lines in there and you can see, I will say that density, people get hung up on density a lot of times, and I think that sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees because of you're hung up on large lots out in the countryside. But as we age, it gets harder and harder to maintain large lots, and we also have people who would like a smaller lot, but a more quality development, and I think you guys have kind of answered that with some of this open space requirement.
Right. So, and that's another good thing I like to point out with this graphic is that, when we were going through this process over the last 18 months, there was a lot of comments from the public and things that were coming in about we need to increase our minimum lot size. We don't need to have these small lots, and I get that. But this graphic shows that small lots are not necessarily the issue at hand. It's about how they're developed. And I've told everybody I've met with, I have no problem with small lots if they're done the right way. I think small lots are meet the market demand. It's all about how that neighborhood is developed with small lots. So again, going back to that trading, smaller lots and more density for more open space, that's that balance that I think we need to be striving for, that meets the market demands, but also ensures the livability and the quality of life of these neighborhoods for multiple homeowners down in the future.
And usable open space.
And usable open space,
not
right.
Stuck behind a wooden fence.
That's right, because large lots, as we've talked about before, is like one, it can have more impacts to the site itself than smaller lots done the appropriate way. It also, larger lots, 1 acre plus lots does encourage urban sprawl. That's one of the primary things that encourage urban sprawl. So one thing we want to do is focus on that cluster development concept, looking at, hey, small lots are okay, but just make sure you have a trade-off. If you have less private open space in the yards, that we have more public open space within the neighborhood that the residents and kids and everybody can use. And so I think this is a good graphic that shows that, hey, even with smaller lots and more lots, a open space design can be less impactful to the site itself than large lots can be.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from the commission before we start with the speakers?
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, I guess I've calmed down a little bit. We'll start our speakers now. Normally would have opened the public hearing at this point, but we have already done that. So is there any more speakers? Selena, do you have some more? Mr. Dorsey, let you back up. I'll give you your 3 minutes since
Thank you, I appreciate it. There's so much to talk about with this document, and to describe the process as us having been in the conversation for a year and a half or so is just not intellectually accurate. The document that Matthew Brown was having meetings with is not this document. It's not even close. They're not even the same ballpark. In fact, back then with the surveys that were done, those were trying to push the county towards larger lots around the county to keep from having the smaller lots. And so this is an entirely different document, and I do want to thank the development and construction community for being here today. Engineers, a lot of people here. It's hard to get our industry together. There are 45,000 of us working throughout Baldwin County today, and it's not easy for everybody to just get together and come up here. We just want to go out there and do our work and provide the citizens with the product. Everything in this document is cost. the number for the sewer transition from gravity to grinder is not 50 lots. It's never been 50 lots. It won't ever be 50 lots. Sometimes it can be 90 lots, depending on the topography. If you look at a project down in Foley, there's one that has, Roberts Cove, if I remember, has 2 lift stations in there for a large number of lots. And every time you cross a hill, you've got a different lift station. The sewer company takes care and maintains the grinder pumps the same as they do the lift station. It's not an argument to be made there. The cost of the developer is insignificant, whether it's at the beginning or the end, because there's not really much of a development community except for Rance's project at North Hills, where you're developing lots and selling them to the customer. They find a builder and do it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's the cost of housing in the county, and that's really what my concern is for all of this. We have a large county with a diverse group of people that are moving here, that live here, and they're not all wanting a 60-foot lot with a park. There are some people that want an acre lot. There are some people that want in between. There are some people that want to live in the city. Some people like living in the county because you get a little bit more breathing room in the county. We need to accommodate all of those people, and by trying to keyhole them through this document seems to restrict the ability for the market to deliver at the best rate and price that it can deliver. Every $5,000 that you add to the cost of a lot is $30 a month to a buyer. This right here is easily $15,000 to $20,000 in the cost of housing, easy. But then you've got the maintenance of all the landscaping that we've got in there that goes into the HOA fees that also drives up the cost of housing, because for someone to qualify for a mortgage, they've got to also be able to pay the homeowner association dues and the property taxes that are associated with. Everything that we're doing here drives up the cost of housing. And we have so many workers that we're trying to bring to our county, and so many new families that are trying to start their family in the county. We are pushing the price point of housing higher and higher throughout Baldwin County by doing this. And I wish that y'all would bring this group to the table to have an open discussion to say, here's the objectives that we'd like to see for the property that's being developed in the community, in the county. How can we do these to make them cost effective and improve the quality of life for the county? I wish y'all would invite us to the conversation. Thank y'all.
Next speaker that I have, and I don't know if the stack got out of order, but Han Hua? Did I say that even closely right?
Han is fine.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman Underwood, for giving me the opportunity to talk with the commission. My name is Han Hua, and I am a realtor at Bellator Real Estate. However, first and foremost, I'm a Gulf Coast girl who grew up here in the area, Midtown Mobile, and my parents moved to the Eastern Shore about 13 years ago. So I've seen the area grown, I've seen it develop since the last millennium, and understand everyone's concern about explosive growth that are contributing, losing the Baldwin County charm. Today, on behalf of Baldwin Realtors and as the chair of Baldwin Realtors Government and Political Affairs Committees, I'm just asking the commission if they could postpone the vote on the amendment to the Baldwin County subdivision regulation. So while we were initially engaged in this process last year, we were not re-engaged this year in 2024 and post-personnel changes. So our org only learned about the revised version this past week, and we just would like to have more time to review the legalese on the 150-page documents and work with the Planning Commission department and the planning commissioners should we have any questions or comment that arise. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Michael Lovetson.
Hey, good morning. I think all four of you know me. I know all of y'all. For those who don't, I'm here today to represent the Fort Morgan Planning and Zoning Advisory Committee. I'm current chair of that. Most of you don't know what I used to do, which for 30 years I spent in consulting engineering. A large portion of that was doing development. The rest of it was doing consulting for municipalities and government agencies, that sort of thing. So I've got experience in both quite a bit, and I work a lot with the environmental groups here too. But today I'm speaking specifically for owners, residents. That's what we do on the advisory committee. Y'all are very intelligent. Y'all have been working on this a long time. I appreciate everything's been done, but I'm listening to some of the questions. So what I'm about to tell you should ring true, and that is over the last 3 weeks, I've encountered an awful lot of people that don't have a clue that this was going on. I know we've met our legal obligations for advertising, but it would seem to me that with some of the questions that a large group of people have, including my committee, which didn't know about it. I mean, I serve on the, or I'm a member of the Baldwin County Fire Chiefs Association. I can't tell you the number of conversations that we've had about new subdivisions and issues. This specifically has never been brought up, which means the majority of the chiefs don't even know about it. So while we've done what we're supposed to do, I think we probably need to do a little bit more to get more input from more folks. So what I would request today is that if y'all would consider tabling this for a little bit so that we can set up some more interaction with the public. After all, that's what this is about. So we get a little more input. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Chloe Kelly.
Hello, Chloe Kelly. I am speaking on behalf of a group that's here today.
Okay. All right, there you go.
So there are a group of individuals from the development, engineering, construction community here today that we've had over the last week various discussions with, and we wanted to bring our concerns to you all for consideration and ask respectfully that this be tabled. The proposed text amendment is 150 pages. It's got 19 amendments plus, and about 10 of them, so over 50%, are either lacking clarification or clarity in the way it's drafted, or they're open to interpretation or at the discretion of planning staff or the commission. It was highlighted earlier in today's meeting that Planning Commission is to administer the subdivision regulations, not to draft them, which seems counterintuitive to then have 10 plus amendments that are open to their discretion or how they're going to interpret them. On behalf of myself and those here in the meeting today, we're not trying to vilify the document. We understand and love Baldwin County and understand the intention of making improvements to how things are done, but the way that this document is currently drafted leads to many questions, which you've already heard some today, from various stakeholders that this will impact. And I think it's important for that text to be clarified so that way we can ensure that it's being interpreted consistently and being applied that way as well. Because otherwise, how can you ensure that different reviewers or members of staff or the Planning Commission are going to be able to look to this document to guide decision making and have those decisions be consistent and equitable across the board depending on who the applicant is. I did want to take the opportunity to go over some of the more concerning proposed amendments just to highlight what the issues are. Considering the sewer, I wanted to touch on, I myself am not an engineer, but I do want to highlight the fact that gravity sewer, depending on the location or site specifics or what's off-site in relation to a proposed development, is not always feasible. And I know that there is an asterisk in the document that says if an engineer can somehow justify that, but I think that there needs to be more clear and concise clarity as to what is the justification, because again, if it's open to the interpretation of a reviewer, what one person might deem justifiable, somebody else may not. And that's a big cost driver, but also just a feasibility deterrent if that can't be a low impact, or excuse me, a low pressure system versus a gravity sewer system. Additionally, I know we've talked about the lid requirements, but those provisions are also open to interpretation. It's not clear on if there's going to be a set number of lid techniques that would be implemented or be required to be implemented. It just references lid techniques. It also references the lid techniques guideline that the Alabama state has adopted. That's a 264-page document that's got multiple pages of different options, including permeable pavers, green roofs, things that aren't necessarily applicable to Baldwin County. But again, if we can just get clarity as to what those expectations are so everybody understands. Additionally, I know it was discussed that in order to get 60-foot lots or some of these smaller lot sizes, you can implement the lid techniques, but in the language it says you may qualify for those lots. and then it refers to the table. So I think it needs to be clarified as if somebody is doing and implementing what's being asked for, what's being encouraged, there needs to be some assurity that they are going to get the end result, because that is the intention. If you're going to set aside additional space or incur additional costs and you think you're going to pick up density on the back end, there needs to be some validity to that again isn't open to interpretation. Regarding street trees, it would be helpful for the county to identify where utilities are being placed, because street trees would impact utilities that are in the right-of-way. So that is not clarified here, but it would be helpful in order for that to be feasible and ensure that those trees, as they grow, don't damage underground utilities. Additionally, the open space requirements. In the text, it says that the open space requirements will apply to new developments as well as new phases of existing developments. It seems counterintuitive that you'd have already approved subdivisions, that individuals have gone through the planning process, gotten approvals, and now future phases are going to be held to a different standard than what was initially the case when they were getting approved. There's also non-compliance text that outlines that there will be stop work orders if a permitted site has continued compliance issues or off-site impacts, but it does not outline what would warrant the stop work order. And that, to give you an idea, when we're final platting or towards the end of development, we're probably incurring on average $70,000 to $80,000 in interest a month. So it's a material cost if we were to receive a delay. I understand in some instances it's going to be warranted, but I think it should be properly outlined so everyone understands. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Tracy Gamble.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I just actually wanted to compliment the fact that you are working on this, and to say that many of the ideas are very good. It's obvious, I think, at least to me, that some more tweaking might be called for the details. I also want to point out that in my experience, just because the lot is smaller does not necessarily mean the home is cheaper. I've seen that a lot of developers, no matter what size the lots are, the homes are not necessarily what any one of us would consider affordable. So some of the net profits to some large developers is in the billions. And so I think sometimes that needs to be taken into account, what those retail prices are estimated to be when deciding what is best as far as lot sizes are concerned. However, the cluster home idea, even townhouses, I think is a good idea. And the open space is very lovely, and I think it adds a lot of quality of life to the community. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Palmer.
I'm here representing the group as well.
A group. Hold on one second. Let's get the timer right. Okay.
My name's Justin Palmer. I'm a land surveyor here in Baldwin County. Have been licensed for 10 years. We do mostly small subdivision, 1 or 2 lots. Somebody wants to cut out a piece of ½ acre off of 5 acres and deed to someone else. Simple stuff like that, and exempt situations. And thus is what's brought me through talking with planning staff about a current development that they consider as a development, which is actually drawing of a property line. And it has revealed that there's actually quite a bit more wrong with our subdivision regulations that need to be addressed. I'd like to start first though with the family subdivision, because there is some issues there with that. And I referenced the Supreme Court case that I handed out to the commissioners this morning regarding takings and exactions. In the case of Aggins versus the city of Tiburon, the court stated that the land use controls constitute takings if they do not substantially advance legitimate governmental uses, or if they deny a property owner economically viable use of his land. further states that when the landowner has been called upon to sacrifice all economically beneficial use in the name of the common good, that is, to leave his property economically idle, he has suffered a taking. And I guess let me back up. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, the last line says, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." To withhold a landowner's right to sell their property is taking their property without just compensation. Their right to sell their property is also their property. Their money is their property. And this case sets precedents. I've passed this to staff. Apparently it's been reviewed by council, and I've asked and begged and pleaded for this to be tabled long enough to give the constituents of the community input. That has not even been entertained. So I'm wondering why, for one, we would entertain the idea of passing something that's unconstitutional. I think it's a very serious concern. Part two, that is also unconstitutional, is the way we're taking the word development and the word subdivision and interacting them as if they're one, swapping them as if they're one. Our current regulations define the word development as development includes, but is not limited to, the design work of lot layout, one element, the construction of drainage structures, the construction of buildings and public use areas, and the planning and construction of public streets and public roads, and the placement of public utilities. So it lists out 5 elements, and it doesn't say one or the other, some of them, it says all of them and the last one, okay? You then roll over to subdivision, and by the way, when I mention a 2-lot subdivision, with no improvements, no infrastructure, no roads, nothing being built, I'm told that is a development by staff. They said that they have been told that by council. So we got to get that figured out. We get over to subdivision, and it says the development and the division of a lot, tract, or parcel of land. So it says the 5 elements that I've already mentioned, and the division of a lot, tract, or parcel of land into 2 or more lots. And so what we're experiencing here is when I have a 5-acre tract to which I would like to keep the owner of nameless at this point, but this is the 15 or so page checklist that every developer gets to run, as they should. However, there's no infrastructure, no development taking place when you're drawing a property line. And so we can't require this according to the Constitution of the United States. And the fix for this is something that was removed in past amendments, is a provision for a minor subdivision that has the criteria of 4 to 6 lots, no new infrastructure. So,
Okay, thank you,
selective
sir.
enforcement is also an issue when you're not.
What now?
Selective enforcement of these rules has also been an issue. I was told through.
Thank you, sir, your time is up.
Sorry, I thought you asked for what I was saying.
We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Sean Walker.
Hey, good morning.
Are you?
Hey, I'm Sean Walker, and I'm with a group.
A group?
Hey, and I got asked to speak, really, we've talked about the planning portion, we've talked about the development portion, but the tip of the spear, the end user, is the buyer, and just how this is all kind of affecting that. 5 years ago in that Eastern Shore area, we're building a 1,800 square foot home, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, gold fortified, and I'm about $210,000, 65 by 150, 160 deep lot. Today, that same house in the Eastern Shore area is running in the 340s. And so with that increased cost, the the group I'm with, we're probably the largest in the home seller in the MLS in Baldwin County. Our cancellation rate right now is about 48 or 49%. We're seeing across the board. And these increase in prices, sometimes it's $4,000 or $5,000 that causes, us to not be able to underwrite and individually get a home loan. So what we're doing to try to kind of combat that is, and we've all heard the term shrinkflation. And so we're building now 1,400 square foot homes, single car garage on 50-foot lots, 140 deep. So we're having to do some things to adjust to get down to that 280, underneath that 300,000 price point, so that we can continue to sell homes to buyers here in Baldwin County. The green spaces that's been talked about, we've got HOAs in Baldwin County that are, north of $100 a month, and that's just another cost that we're passing on to these buyers, and to maintain. And I think someone mentioned putting a track around a pond or a retention pond. Those things have to be maintained, and there's a cost for that. And so our low end, you're $700-800 a year in just HOA fees. So those also are having an impact on our buyers. I heard about larger lots. We're getting a lot of retirees that are coming, and they don't want the larger lots. They are purposely looking for the smaller lots. They don't want to have to go out and maintain these and do the yard work. And so with that, I'm just going to conclude, has there been an analysis done on what this increased cost on new construction home buyers will be if these new subregs are approved? Thank you.
Thank you. Turn that back on. Thank you. John Paul Vallis, or Bill? He hit it? Okay. You're part of his group. Steve Pumphrey.
Good morning. Steve Pumphrey, and I'm chairman of the Planning Commission, but I'm not representing the Planning Commission. I'm speaking for myself. So I know much of what you're dealing with this morning are things that we have brought to the table because of things that we've seen over time as a Planning Commission. Not everything that's on this list is what we brought up. I will say that one disappointment in the process is that, yes, the Planning Commission over the last several years has made a list of issues that we saw being part of what we see constantly being submitted to the Planning Commission for approval. Quite honestly, I see very few large-sized lots being submitted to this county. The majority of them are small lots, and the majority of them are in very rural areas. If a Dollar General store goes in an intersection, it becomes a new place for a development to go in. We see it all over. We see schools that are being built in rural areas, and that becomes a new place for high-dense, 60-foot wide lot developments. And unfortunately, these developments go in and they have no place, no common areas. I understand. I've been on the side of these developers. I've worked with many of them. I know the cost involved. But there's also a planning side at somewhere. There's got to be a balance in this. Now, I will say that from a Planning Commission standpoint, we had the problems. We just weren't included in the solutions. That's my only disappointment in this, and I'll speak from that, and I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Dixon. But we formed a subcommittee, and that's about the time that Matt left the county and we hired someone new. Maybe he didn't understand, but we understood that we were going to be a part of meeting and trying to come up with resolutions to the problems that we were seeing. We didn't have a chance to speak to that. What's before you today are not things that we were a party of. I'm not saying that I'm 100% behind any of these either. There are some that I'm fine with, but there are many that I'm not sure they're the best solution. They're better than what we have right now. I can tell you that what we have right now is not working. 60-foot wide lots with no common space is not good planning, especially when it's in a rural area miles away from a municipality where there are parks. There are parking problems within these developments. I've been in these developments where 60-foot wide and they're parking on the streets. Now, we could have probably came up with some solutions to this, maybe different from what we've seen. I don't know. We didn't have that opportunity. But All that being said, the dilemma for you all obviously is what do we do now? If you table this, I know the flip side of this. Every developer out there is going to rush to get his development approved before you make these changes. Because they know if changes come and they're going to be costly, they're going to try to get under the wire. I've been on that side of it, I know. So I'm here to say I'm not against what's been done. I wish we'd had more input, but it's better than what we've had. Maybe it deserves a chance to go and let's see what happens. Changes can be made later. But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve.
Jerry McInnes.
Good morning.
Morning.
I hadn't planned to speak today, but listening to everyone and seeing everybody has really moved me. And I'm kind of a numbers guy, and I'd like to share a number with you. But before I get to that, I once heard a saying that we are the sum of our decisions, individually and collectively. And that is very true based on what I'm about to tell you. For the past quarter century, almost beginning in 2001, 2002, the GDP of Baldwin County was $3.1 billion. For 2022, $10.8 billion, 250% increase in GDP. Effectively, this decision today is an integral part of a $10.8 billion valuation. I've talked with many developers in providing service. We're here independently as a utility company. We are not a developer. We are on the fence, but we want to do our job, but we also want to increase the communication because our focus is on a better tomorrow for the county as a whole. Based on my understanding, it takes about 2 years to get through the development process through the county, from the time they meet with staff until they get final plat approval. Having said that, this situation started a year ago, and the publication has been around for about 30 days, and there just hasn't been enough time for all of the stakeholders to have input into the situation so that we can have a proper way forward to ensure that we don't put the success that this county has been enjoying for the past quarter century at risk. So I'm here to ask that the consideration be delayed until after the first of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of the speakers that I have a sign-up sheet for. However, if there is someone in the audience that did not sign up to speak and you do wish to speak, I will allow that on this topic right now. So is there anybody that did not speak already but you wish to speak? No? Okay. Then we'll close the public hearing, and before I ask for a motion of any sort, I just wanted to state that I think we've all heard that for even everyone that has spoken has asked for us to at least table this and look into it. And so a public hearing has been held on the current published regulations. If we table this and there are substantial changes, there will be another advertised public hearing process. So I will call for a motion in a moment. I just wanted to state that if there are specific, it's what I've encouraged everyone that has contacted me over the last couple of weeks, please, our planning staff, even planning commission members, please, contact staff. They will have a meeting with you. They're going above and beyond having these meetings and helping with people. It's unfortunate that everyone feels they didn't know about it, but now you do. So now we have an opportunity to work on that. So I would like to ask for a motion, someone to make a motion to table this.
I don't mind making the motion, but I want to know what the table time can be. We've got to add that into the motion, right,
Exactly.
Brad?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I make a motion that we table this till after the first of the year.
Second.
Well,
let's put a specific, what's the first meeting date in January? That'd be the 7th? So So table till January 7, 2025?
Well, what I would like to suggest that if we're tabling the existing regulations. If we come up with new regulations, there'll be new,
Yes, you're tabling the vote on what's been presented today. If a new set of subdivision regulations with different revisions was submitted, then this whole process, it could go simultaneously, but this whole process would start over. So there'd be the 3 weeks of publication, another public hearing.
So I'll restate my motion. Make a motion that we table the item that we've been talking about today until January the 7th, 2025.
Okay? We have a motion to table the subdivision regulations that's been discussed today until the January, is it 7th? Is that the first meeting of January 7th? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I've got just somebody can help me answer the question that's out there that's been speaking today. Is this enough time? Somebody come up and this is a discussion time, so you don't have a timer on you or nothing. Just don't get carried away with a speech. But it's better than 2 weeks from now, right? Because it's either this January 7th date or we're going to do this in 2 weeks.
The January 7th date is preferred, but
Okay.
the challenge that I think I'll speak for the group on is we're going to have, if this draft comes back to y'all for consideration January 7th, we're going to have the same concerns that we do today.
That's why we're looking for y'all to chew the draft up and cross out and highlight and do all that stuff. Y'all got until January 7th to bring us back a product that you like.
So if that's the intention for us to be able to provide y'all feedback and an outline by January 7th, then I think
it has we have an advertisement.
Absolutely.
So you would need to, if it's going to be on the January 7th meeting, then there would be new advertisement if it's going to substantially change these regulations. If it's the same regulations, then the public hearing has been held. And I don't know if we can, is there that much tabling time on this current one? There's some semantics here that.
But wouldn't it change? I mean, what if we have time to give it to the Planning and Zoning Commission and let them look at it again and get with the stakeholders? And if they find amendments that we need to fix, we'll keep extending it, the public hearing, right?
Well, if there's going to be changes to the substantial context, changes here, if that's what's going to be considered, then we're going to, as Brad just said, we're going to go through this process again.
So this is not a big deal. So this hasn't even been adopted.
That's right.
If we do something different, add even one sentence in here, we know that there's an advertising process for that. I get that. My thing is there's obviously, and it's not, I don't think it's unfortunate, there's just a lot of people here that don't understand what's going on. So I feel like that they have the right to come to the table and maybe definitely be at the table and with yourselves amongst our staff.
I just want to be clear with what the January 7th motion entails is all I'm asking, since once we make this motion and if it passes, we need to just understand what the timeline would be looking like for the January 7th. I would defer to staff to make sure that we understand what we're voting on.
So on January 7th, Brad, when we come back in, will it just be a vote for this set of plans?
Correct. The vote on January 7th would be these subdivision amendments as currently submitted. That doesn't mean you can't have a separate track.
And at that particular meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, if we have come up with thousands of different amendments and scratch outs and stuff, then we can go back to the drawing board.
Correct. You would have to republish and there'd be a new public hearing. And but you don't have to wait for that as well. You could be doing that in the meantime.
Well, if it sounds like there's going to be there's going to be changes, obviously. There's going to be changes. So would there just be any need to even table it?
Well, if a majority of the commission thinks that this will not be approved as submitted, then you could just reject it. You could just vote to not deny is the wrong word, but you could vote it down.
Well, I'm just saying that if there's I know we do, we're in discussion right now, okay? And
Yeah, I mean, you could.
I was talking to Jim.
You could withdraw the second and the motion and then make a motion to disapprove these amendments, and then there's nothing pending. But I don't, it doesn't hurt
I'm just
to table
asking
it.
questions.
Yeah.
Okay? Making sure that what we're voting on is what we understand that we're voting on.
Right. Yeah, right now, the motion is just to table this as written to January 7th. And if there could be a whole separate track of amendments done in a different document, that could be proceeding simultaneously.
Okay. So the only thing I would say is that I think that regardless, we need to get to busy and get to work on what the concerns are. But the people who are bringing the concerns forth, please get with our staff to, I think the second lady that spoke is what you really emphasize, and you as well, others, but that's what you're asking. So with that, we have a motion to table this until January the 7th and a second.
I just want to say one thing. I just wish that, everybody would, please, if we're going to table this thing until January, please get with our staff and talk. I mean, we can make this thing better or we can make it worse. So if we talk to each other, we'll have a better opportunity of making it happen. Our staff will listen to you. We've got a good staff now, and they will listen. So I mean, it's not that hard to do. It's just a matter of picking up a telephone and calling one of our staff and saying, look, I think this, maybe we look at this, and the staff will review it along with the planning commission to make sure that we're following the right track. I know we've got to do something because we got to protect our environment a little bit better than what we're doing. Our environment is very important. That's why people are coming here. They're not coming here just because I'm going to Baldwin County. They love what we have here, and we need to keep what we have here. So,
May I make one suggestion for the meeting date? Staff, Sean back here. The first meeting is here, whereas the second meeting of the month is in Fairhope, and I feel like that's more in the center where the citizens are, who would probably want more input, because I think most of the citizen feedback is very positive. So I just feel like that would give citizens more of a chance to speak as well if we did the mid-January meeting for the tabling date.
Anywhere that they want us to meet. We got offices in Robertsville, we got them in Foley, we got them in Fairhope. We've got offices all over, and they can, meet wherever, it's convenient for them. We want to make it convenient for
I will say this, the January 7th meeting is generally a light meeting. It would be better to have, if you're going to have 50 people speaking, it would be better to have it at the January 7th meeting. Usually the second meeting of the month is where the Planning Commission rezoning cases come about. And as you know, last month we had 7 rezoning cases, and I think that would just really, I think that interested people in the room can get busy. And I think that our staff is willing and ready. So I really think that I appreciate your suggestion, but sometimes it doesn't take me as long to get to Bay Minette as it does to Fairhope because of traffic. So with that, I have a motion and a second to table this to January the 7th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is we don't have anything under other staff recommendations. I'll give you all a moment to exit the room so we can finish our meeting. Y'all take your comments out in the hallway, please. Thank you. We're almost finished. I mean, y'all give us like 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, next is public comments. We don't have any other staff, we don't have any addenda, we have public comments. Is there anyone that has signed up for public comments? If you didn't sign up and you wish to speak, I will allow you to speak, so come on.
of all, thank you for the consideration. And certainly, a lot of the commentary and text I'm hearing are, we want to be a part of the solution. And I appreciate tabling the item, and Commissioner Gruber, I appreciate call. What I'd like to ask is if we could have a work session with staff to go through some of the concerns and talk about practically.
Absolutely.
We can certainly
I have
get
no
the
problem
list
with
together.
that.
And I would be interested in a work session with the Planning Commission to address what Steve Pumphrey's comments are with the things that they're saying that maybe that we as an industry need to figure out how to do a better job presenting. If we could schedule those 2 work sessions, we're going to come out with a better outcome.
All right, just get with Frank and Jay and do it.
Fantastic.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, because it has to be advertised, I think, a week and then out. Okay. All right, is there anybody from the press here?
Good.
Get past that one quick. Commissioner comments. How about Commissioner Gruber?
Again, staff, thank you so very much for getting us where we're at today with this agenda. And again, I'd like to reiterate that please keep the people in our prayers that were devastated by the hurricane. Looking at some of the pictures and seeing some of the stuff that happened, we are very fortunate. I was listening to the radio this morning coming up here, and they were talking about the one place where the movie Grease was filmed at. That whole thing is completely wiped out. It's all in the lake. The whole community is in the lake. That's devastating. And they said it would take probably years and years to be able to get over that. So, I mean, please keep those people in our prayers as we go along. You know, there's still a lot of lives that was taken. Plus, there's a lot of people that are still missing. And, you know, and finding them would make a closure for everyone. So, thank you very much.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Just echo what Commissioner Gruber said, but just want to say thank you, staff, for putting all this together. I know this was tough, but thank y'all. That's all I have.
It's always the same, right? I just wanted to encourage maybe our public information officer to maybe start linking up some websites on our commission page to start seeing, giving some places where people can start donating for this relief. There's Alabama Department of Emergency Management has put a bunch of links on their website from FEMA. There's my sister and her husband live in Boone, North Carolina, and I will tell you that they got lucky, but there's some problems because they can't get, I think they can get off or on or something. I mean, they're trapped, and a lot of people have suffered. They're professors at Appalachian State, and I don't even know where half the school is. So those pictures that you see, that's stuff that we don't see. I mean, we see initial destruction and it's gone, and everybody's picking up the pieces the next day. This isn't like that for these communities, and they'll be picking up these pieces for years and years to come if there's anything left to even pick up. So I would highly encourage people to get involved with these websites to where you can donate finances, supplies. Most churches are doing things now. There's tons of drop-off spots. I noticed one in Daphne. I think it was on Belrose Avenue at the volunteer fire department there, and where they've got trailers where you can go dump stuff off, but they don't care. They don't need anything right now because they've lost everything. A lot of times, you know, we got to rely on ourselves to help each other out. They're sitting there waiting on federal government to help them out, and that's not going to work. So band together, we help each other out, and if I could leave for a week or two, I'd be up there helping them out myself. But I'm just going to send our donations, and the people up there really are suffering in ways that are unmanageable. It's unmanageable to us. Like I said, Commissioner Gruber said it earlier, we've had storms. We know what it's like to have storms. We don't know what it's like to have that. Being in a house while it's floating down a river. I've never heard of that here. So So please just keep those people in your prayers. That's like the biggest thing on my heart. And what's going on in this country today is going to take an act of God and prayer warriors to heal the nation, because when you have every single port in the United States go on strikes last night at midnight, things may be disrupted in our chain of stuff. So we there again, band together, and if you can help somebody out, help somebody out. And that's it.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can help. A lot of y'all in Baldwin County support the Baldwin County Sheriff's Boys and Girls Ranch, and the director that retired there for over 30 years, Mr. Jim Harmon, his son is the state director for Black Mountain Home for Children and Youth and Families in North Carolina, in Black Mountain, North Carolina. And this is in a lot of places. I'm not saying it just to help these folks, but they can't even support volunteers right now. So if you wanted to get in your car and go up there and do something, there's no way to support that. What they really need is they need money to rebuild. They need supplies for their children and stuff. And I think that kind of answers the question for everybody. There is, because there's no infrastructure there to support people coming in unless you can bring your own power and stuff like that. So they're going to need a lot. And they said, you know, God saw us through the storm where no one was injured, but there was a group of children and college age kids that were in one home, and it got really rough. And about an hour they decided to leave, and about an hour later the mountain mudslide down and destroyed everything. So it's like Jeb said, it's a total different landscape up there. They're not prepared for this. We can see how much better prepared we are in our area for recovery than ever before. And I want to say hats off to just what I've experienced here. Well, we had it bad, don't get me wrong, but we've got so much in place, and that infrastructure and stuff that we have been going ahead of the game, and some of the grants and some of the things that we've been doing. I know it gets aggravating to our citizens to have a road closed because you're improving the drainage and putting in new pipes and things like that. I see one smiling out here. But we're hoping that if we do have another event, that won't wash out and you can get to your house. And you know, I tell people all the time, a few months of patience may give you a lifetime of benefit. So it's very, very hard. So it's not just North Carolina, but that's some of the pictures I'm seeing. I have no idea some of my classmates from even high school that actually have homes up there and different things like that. And for some of them, they're thanking God it's not their main home, that it is a mountain cabin and things like that. But it's bad. So with that, I just want to go ahead and I want to thank the staff, especially Jay and the planning department staff and Frank and all of you guys that have been engaged in this process. It is never going to be easy to pass a regulation because nobody wants to have more regulations put on them, and we don't really want to do that. But when a county that is growing as fast as we are, the quality of life is very, very important here, and it's extremely hard for an elected official to balance the difference between the wants of individuals and for people who are in the building and development world. I hope no one thinks that we're anti-development. We're also not trying to keep life as good as we can, but it's a hard, hard balance. And with that, I'm the only thing keeping y'all from ending this meeting. So entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. See you guys next time.